Thank you so much for having me here today. So first I wanted to tell you that before we even knew the Antarctic continent existed, the ancient Greeks insisted that a great southern land must exist in symmetry with the north. Without it, they said, the whole world would topple over. And the Greeks were right, because since its discovery, scientists have documented that the Antarctic stores 90% of the world's fresh water, it regulates our global climate, and it drives global ocean circulation. And despite being one of the harshest environments in the world, as Marcelo just described, it is the coldest and windiest place, and the waters are below the point of freezing. Despite this, the Antarctic waters absolutely teem with life. In fact, studies have shown that Antarctica contains our healthiest marine ecosystems left in the world. And the study in front of you is an illustration of that, where the scientists did an assessment of the global impacts of human activity on the world's oceans. And all you really need to know from this map is that the spectrum is from red to blue, and the areas in red are most damaged, whereas the areas in blue are our most healthy or most pristine areas left in the ocean. And you can see on this map that there are very few areas left that are blue, but the waters around Antarctica are. So these are our healthiest marine ecosystems. Why? Well, as Marcelo described, Antarctica is very remote, so it's very far away and hard to get to. And there's also a shield of ice that forms around it, and this is what the graphics are showing you. Antarctica in the winter is on your left, and Antarctica in the summer on your right. But it's not just remoteness and ice, it's also political will. And I want to highlight that scientific collaborations in Antarctica have created a framework where countries can work side by side as scientists, even if there are diplomatic tensions at home. And we have been doing this in Antarctica since the 1800s. And I want to highlight one particular scientific collaboration of the International Geophysical Year that happened in 1957-58. And this scientific collaboration led directly to a political collaboration and the signing of the Antarctic Treaty in 1959 at the height of the Cold War. And this was a phenomenal agreement. If you read the treaty, it actually sets aside the entire continent for the sake of peace and science. The treaty bans military activities, it bans nuclear activities. Later agreements also ban mining, so mining is not allowed in Antarctica. The treaty also suspends any sovereignty claims, and so there are no indigenous people in Antarctica, but there are claims there, and the treaty essentially freezes those claims, creating it as an international space. And I want to pause and highlight how amazing this is. The Antarctic continent is essentially a world park, and it belongs to all of us. And I don't know anywhere else in the world that we have had international differences and set them aside so that we could actually protect a place for the sake of humanity. I truly believe it's our species at its best. Now, the Antarctic Treaty System has other agreements that are part of it, and I want to highlight for you the Convention on the Conservation of Antarctic Marine Living Resources, or CAMLR. And this is an international body that manages Antarctica's oceans, so all the waters around Antarctica. And they have 25 different member states, and they meet once a year down in Australia, and they make decisions about the oceans around Antarctica. And in line with the Antarctic Treaty, they are seen as a global leader in conserving our oceans. However, there are commercial fisheries in Antarctica, and the picture on the top is an Antarctic krill. It's a small shrimp-like crustacean that really forms the basis of the Antarctic marine food web. So many animals eat Antarctic krill. Have any of you ever eaten an Antarctic krill that you know of? Probably more of you have than you think, because the fishery is actually largely for fish meal, to feed aquaculture and to feed pigs and chickens. And then the other main industry that we fish krill for is omega-3 pills, so health supplements. So if you've taken fish oil pills, you very well may have been eating Antarctic krill. And indeed, it is the fish oil market that is putting more pressure to fish for krill because it's a very lucrative market. Now, the second main fishery is for toothfish, and toothfish are the top fish predator in the Southern Ocean. We don't have sharks in Antarctica, and so toothfish fill that role. They grow in excess of 2 meters. They will weigh more than 140 kilograms. They're a massive fish, so they very much are the top fish predator in the Southern Ocean. Now, in the United States, we don't call them toothfish, we call them Chilean sea bass. And here in Chile, my understanding is you call them bacalao de profundidad, is what they're called here. And for me personally, this fish is a fish that I fell in love with, this beautiful fish. Do you all think this fish is beautiful, no? But 15 years ago, I was able to start studying the life history of this fish to try to understand how old do they get, where do they live, when do they mature. And as I was studying it, I learned more and more that this fishery is very vulnerable. This fish lives to be 50 years old. It matures late in life, and it is very vulnerable to overfishing. And while its name, bacalao de profundidad, means cod from the deep, I also would like you to consider that it means a profound cod. And this fish truly has the most remarkable adaptations. It has antifreeze in its blood that keeps it from freezing solid. So it's a truly remarkable animal. I don't know if you are wondering why we are fishing in Antarctica. When I started studying these fish, I kept wondering, why would we send fishing vessels literally to the bottom of the world? These are the most remote waters that you could send a vessel. It's very dangerous. But the reason is that we have really damaged fisheries all over the world. And this is a graphic from the United Nations showing you that by 2008, 90% of our global fisheries were overexploited. So we have very few places left in the world where we still have room for expansion, if you will, and many consider Antarctica to be a place where we still have room. But I want to show you that it's actually quite a busy international fishing space. The map in front of you shows Antarctica, and the thick black boundary around it is the CAMLR boundary, so that's their management boundary. And every flag represents a vessel that notified to fish. So I hope what you can see is actually it's a very busy space for fishing, and as I said, there is increasing pressure. Chile actually does engage in krill fishing around the Antarctic Peninsula, as well as many other countries do. Now, in addition to fishing pressure, as many of you know, Antarctica is undergoing rapid environmental change due to global climate change. And the figure I'm showing you is a very complicated figure, but I just want you to understand that the areas in red are areas that we know, or we're fairly certain, are warming. Areas in blue are areas that are cooling. So it is a complicated story, but we know it's changing, and we know that it is impacting the ecosystem. Around the peninsula in particular, we have already started to see declines of penguin populations and other animals. So I've told you three things so far. I've told you that Antarctica is home to some of our healthiest marine ecosystems left in the world. I've told you that the Antarctic Treaty System in CAMLR is a leader in managing the environment. But I've also told you that we have this increasing threat of climate change in fishing. So what do? Well, marine protected areas, which are areas where human activity is restricted, these are an increasingly popular tool around the world for conserving marine biodiversity and managing fisheries. And up on the screen is a map of the global marine protected areas that we have so far. Right now, it's almost 7.5% of the world's oceans are protected. And I want to highlight that here in Chile, you are a global leader in marine protected areas. You have protected already almost 30% of your coast. So why are these increasingly popular, these protected areas? Well, the reason is that there are hundreds of studies that show that they cause increases in biomass, in the density of animals, so how concentrated they are, in the size of individual animals, and in the species richness or the diversity. And there are many studies that show this, that essentially within a protected area, you have more life and the ecosystem is healthier. And this is really important for places like Antarctica because we've shown that you can actually have the system be more resilient to climate change if it's in a protected area. Now, CAMLR actually has been talking about marine protected areas for many decades, and they are considered a leader in developing international protected areas on the ocean, which is a very difficult thing to do. But they are working towards a whole network of protected areas. And so there's two graphics in front of you, and the one on the left is a benthic regionalization. And all that means is that scientists have worked to identify what are the different areas of the seafloor that are important. And then the map on the right is a pelagic regionalization, so just trying to understand what are the different regions in the ocean's water column. And the point being that the goal is to get protected areas that encompass all the different colors on the map, and that will allow the system to be most resilient. Now, I want to tell you a short story about the Ross Sea Antarctica in particular. So here in Chile, we are closest to the Antarctic Peninsula, and the Ross Sea is on the opposite side of Antarctica, closest to New Zealand. And this area was a priority for protection because it was considered to be the healthiest of all large marine ecosystems left in the world. And not only is it a healthy system, it's incredibly productive. And the picture in front of you was taken by NASA, so it was taken from outer space, and it shows you a phytoplankton bloom in the Ross Sea. And this phytoplankton bloom happens every summer, and it drives an incredible array of life. The Ross Sea supports disproportionate amounts of emperor penguins and Adelie penguins and many species of seals and whales and other animals. Now I want to introduce you to this man on the screen. His name is Dr. David Ainley. He's an Antarctic ecologist based in the United States. And David has been working in the Ross Sea for decades, trying to understand how the ecosystem works. And for him, Antarctica and the Ross Sea in particular was special because it was this place where he could understand how does a healthy ecosystem work. And he considered it to be one of the only places in the world where you could study that. And so what he saw happening in the Ross Sea in the mid-1990s was a commercial fishery for toothfish beginning to happen. And he was really worried it was going to disrupt the whole ecosystem. So he started a big effort and wrote many scientific papers making a case that we need to protect this place to keep it as a living laboratory. Now, his work got the attention of a critically acclaimed conservation photographer based in Boulder, Colorado, named John Weller, and that's the man on the screen in front of you. And John and David got together and started a project called The Last Ocean. Now, at the time, I was still studying toothfish, and John and David found me, and John in particular approached me and said, "We need to talk about toothfish." And he convinced me to join this project and later convinced me to marry him as well, as we worked on the project over the course of 10 years. And so we also recruited a filmmaker from New Zealand, and the four of us took on this issue. And we created a flood of media all over the world. We produced an award-winning documentary. We produced a beautiful book that we distributed to all the different governments who were working in Antarctica. And in order to really get the public excited, we got a couple celebrities to use the media as well. And this is something that sort of frustrated us because we could advocate it and get maybe 7 signatures, but if Leonardo DiCaprio is advocating for you, you will get millions. But this really helped the public get very excited about this place that's so far away and so hard to feel. However, I told you this group, CAMLAR, is the one who makes decisions, and we are working on the outside. And so I knew I had to get inside that room to participate in the negotiations. And so starting in 2012, I was able to talk them into giving me a seat in the back of the room, not at the table, but at least I could start that process of understanding the negotiations. And in 2012, we brought a proposal for a protected area in the Ross Sea to CAMLAR. But we didn't get the proposal. It took many, many years. And the reason for that is 2 major things. One is that inherently, when you set up a protected area, you have to close some areas to fishing. And there's tension between what do you protect and what do you keep open for fishing. And for many countries in Antarctica, they are also really concerned with fishing in the future. So maybe they don't want to fish right now, but they want to protect their right to fish in the future. And the other major thing is that Antarctica may be physically isolated, but it is not politically isolated. And the United States was one of the main countries pushing for a protected area in the Ross Sea. And in these meetings, there would be lots of tension between Russia and the United States that had nothing to do with the protected areas. And so we actually had to work at the presidential level in order to get this passed, and that took many years, but we did get there. And obviously, it was not just us. There were millions of people involved in this effort. There were diplomats, scientists from all over the world, conservation organizations, and really millions of individual citizens as well. But in 2016, we were able to get the Marine Protected Area adopted. And the graphic in front of you shows this process where you have 25 different countries, and you have to get them to unanimously agree to adopt this protected area. And it took us many years, and what you're seeing is the flags on the curve shows you over the years getting 1, 2, 3 countries at a time, all agreeing to get them all to agree by consensus to this space. And I wish all of you could have been in the room when we reached consensus on this, after working on it for 10 years, and my husband and I were both in the room, and when the chair came back to the table and he said, "That's it, we have consensus, the MPA is adopted," the room, full of serious people in suits, exploded into applause. Countries stood up and hugged other countries. Scientists had tears in their eyes. We had tears in our eyes. It was one of the most amazing moments of my life. And for me, it highlighted that this was a major environmental win for the world. It is the world's largest marine protected area. But it wasn't just an environmental win. It was a diplomatic win. It was a peace agreement where you had countries who were fighting in other parts of the world come together in the Antarctic and agree to do something that was good for humanity. And it reminded me of the Antarctic Treaty and how we signed that at the height of the Cold War, and it really was for the sake of humanity. And we continue to do this in Antarctica. Now, it's not just about Antarctica for us, it's about the future. And this is a picture of my daughter, Adele, who we named for the penguin, and she's holding her baby brother, Orion Ross, who we named for the Ross Sea because he was born just after it was adopted. And in order to make sure there are Adeles into the future, we need to do more. So in blue is the protected areas we've already adopted. In purple is the areas that are on the table. These are proposals currently being negotiated. And I just want to close with talking about the Antarctic Peninsula, because this is one of the most rapidly changing places in the world, and there's so much life there that is starting to suffer because of climate change, including Antarctic krill. And Chile and Argentina actually worked together to submit this proposal to CAMLR last year. They didn't get it last year, and they had been working on it for many years before that. They didn't get it last year because of a lot of the same issues needing consensus to get it. So what do we do this year to get it? Well, we need high-level diplomacy. We need President Piñera talking to the presidents of China and Russia. We need continued science. We need to work with all the conservation organizations working there who are listed on the bottom. And we need all of you. All of you, your government is leading this effort, and there is so much you can do to help support that and also work with these organizations. So in closing, I hope that I have shown you that in Antarctica, we still have exceptional governance. It's the best place in the world for working together. And for me, it truly represents humanity at its best and the species that we want to be. And with that, I thank you for your attention, and thank you for having me be part of this Congress.